Our next workshop and talk is going to be given by Brother John Banks, the Senatus Treasurer, and he's also a member of the West St Kilda Presidium. John has had many years of experience in street contact work and has attended several PPCs. He has an excellent knowledge of Scripture and is able to use this to effectively dialogue with non-Catholics. Brother Chris Bright is a member of the Eastern Suburbs Curia and has attended many PPCs. He's what we would call a natural. His easygoing manner belies his deep spirituality and solid faith. Chris has also been active in the pro-life movement for many years. Please make them very welcome.
Thanks, Sister Lucy, and thanks for everybody that has stayed on a pretty warm day. Let's move to the first slide where you see a group of us at the most recent PPC at Kerrang. You'll probably recognise a few faces there, amongst them Brother Chris and myself.
I'm supposed to make a comment. One comment I could make is we're badly in need of a bit of youth there.
So going to PPC, you've got to be fully prepared. At least 2 weeks prior to the PPC, pray for its success and request the prayers of others. Working with children and police checks are very important, and we know that a lot of people are going through the process of getting those. A lot already have. But on a PPC, it's imperative because you're going into a parish where the parish priest will require it. Keep in mind that you may never pass this way again, so be ready when opportunity knocks. And just be mindful of what St Peter says in his letter. Always be prepared to make a defence to anyone who calls you to account for the hope that is in you. So when you knock on doors, you don't know what questions are going to be asked. You need to have answers prepared if you can, or you tell the people that you'll get the answer and come back to them. And you've got a lot of help with the catechism, scriptures, CDs, books. We've got a lot of them in the bookshop that you can purchase to help you with apologetics.
I think the first thing I should say that what we need more than anything is people to volunteer for this type of work and realise that everyone can do this work. It's not people who are outgoing, it's not people that have knowledge of the faith particularly spectacular. It's just using your common decency, your good manners, your well behaviour, your Catholic belief, everything that God gave us to do this work, evangelising. And we must remember that the great St Francis, when he was taking his troops into town who were training to be Franciscans, he would say, we're going in to evangelise. And he would say, and we might even at times use words. So in other words, it's the way you dress, the way you act. You've got to live your spirituality. You've got to live being a good Catholic, a good listener, a good humble person that would give the appearance that you are there to help people. So that's the type of person that we're talking about, and that's you and I, everyone who's a dedicated Christian, to do this work. And knocking on doors might be a little bit frightening, but believe me, it's nowhere near as frightening and try to talk people out of abortion and what have you.
So be properly prepared and properly equipped. So you go along with having done a little bit of research about the parish you're going into or the diocese you're going into. You need to bring, essentials, like as it says there, the bedding items, the towel, the toilet bag and requisites. A lot of things are provided, but it's good if you've got your own soaps and things like that. And medication. A lot of people take off on a holiday and they forget that they were taking tablets once a week or whatever. Remember to bring those. Pack 1 or 2 changes of clothing. You don't have to take too much. Remember Christ's own words when he sent out the 72. He said take 1 cloak, 1 staff. A small carry bag to carry around with you while you're on the PPC with any materials, source materials that you're given, water bottle, riding materials, if it's raining, an umbrella, things like that. So you need a sort of a bag, not a satchel, because straight away people will say, well, there's the Jehovah's coming around. So have a shoulder bag or a carry bag.
By the way, you probably know in your own district, but certainly in the districts where we go, there's many signs on the door that says, do not knock. I think they're part and parcel to every new house these days, so don't be perturbed by that sort of thing, because the people still greet you like good country people and welcome you in.
Have clear objectives in mind. You've got to know what the parish priest's real reasons for inviting you to his parish to do the PPC. It could be that he wants the parish census undertaken and he's looking for better mass attendance. He might be hoping people will come to the sacraments, baptism, confirmation, communions. He likes to locate the sick and elderly in his parish often because he can't get around to every house. But you can be his influence by going around on his behalf. And the PPC leader will give you instructions to how he or she wants the PPC conducted. You've got to be mindful of that. You'll get those instructions at each daily meeting that you have. You have a normal Legion meeting before you go out on your visitation.
Back on those notes that you take when you're out, very important, because the priest and the Legion that you've set up will be wanting all the information they want, all the information that you can give them. It's very important that you take down, you can't spend writing notes on everything, but important things to know, like, for instance, there might be children that might be able to be talked into baptism within time if they showed a bit of interest and that sort of thing, or even marriage with couples. So all those sort of information, who the people they are that you've been talking to, where they live, and as much information as you can give.
And your own personal objectives too. Everybody's got their own charismas. It could be that you like to spread the gospel or tell more people about Mary, seek conversions. So you can make up your own objective before you go out there and try and concentrate on that. And always be on the lookout for new members for the local presidium, or if you're just going to start up another one, that'd be high on the list of trying to get prospective members, both active and auxiliary.
Just going back on people who do volunteer for a PPC, on the last one we had up at Kerrang, I think it was the last weekend, there was about 4 ladies who gave up their weekend, working women with families, and they drove all the way up there and they worked for 2 or 3 days, didn't they? And they were, I think, from out the northern suburbs somewhere. But anyway, they did a fantastic job. And they went home that night, but they are really very tired because they worked hard. But there you are, people who you wouldn't have thought been able to make it on a PPC, but they did.
Now I've basically divided up all the different categories of who you might meet at the door into 7. So these are the type of people you'll encounter. Not interested, fortunately, they're few in comparison with the number of doors you knock on. You do get people straight away saying not interested, and mostly when they do, they're still respectful. They're not slamming the door in your face or anything like that. You'll get an occasional one like that, but you've got to expect that. You're going to encounter non-believers. They don't believe in God. They're not Christian or of any other faith.
let me tell a story about that. There was a non-believer that I knocked on the door of. The last house, the time we did the PPC at Albury, the last house before we went home. And it was late morning, and I thought, well, I knocked and knocked. No one came to the door. Knocked. Bloke came in his underpants and doing his shirt up, sort of hiding from me. And I thought, oh, I'm in for trouble here. He said, oh, I'm just getting ready for work. I said, oh, went through any Catholics in the house? No. Might be a good Protestant? No. I said, do you believe in God? He said, oh, no, not really. And I said, you don't believe in God? I said, would you like to have a little prayer card? We carry the St. Francis prayer card, which everybody likes. St. Francis, he belongs to everybody. And he said, oh, I'll take that, all right, yeah. And I said, I don't think you're you are what you call an agnostic. You don't know. Would you like me to pray for you to come to believe? And he said, well, that'd be nice. I would accept that, And so he ended up taking the prayer card and the Divine Mercy. I said, I'll pray through you through the Divine Mercy of Jesus Christ on the mantelpiece that you come to know him. He said, oh, thank you very much. I asked God to bless him, and so that's a bloke who didn't believe. I mean, then some of them aren't happy, but some of them are good.
All right, the third category we've got is non-Christians, so they do believe in God, but they're not Christian. Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, think of others, Confucians, whatever. And the fourth category, non-Catholics.
I should really say something about the Muslims and the likes and the Hindus. We've had plenty of talks with them, and we find them very good, and they're open to listen. And in fact, we prayed with a group of Muslims up in Griffiths and gave all the children little gifts and that, and all the parents were very happy about it. And so it was a good communication. We mightn't have sort of won them over, but it's showing love to each other.
So the non-Catholics could be, well, they are Protestants, non-Catholics, but they could be the Bible-only Christians or fundamentalists, we might describe them as sometimes, the Jehovah's Witnesses. Non-Catholics, but not necessarily Christian, the Jehovah's Witnesses. Mormons neither. I don't think you can say they're really Christian, but they'll talk about Jesus anyway, and that gives you some common ground to discuss.
As Father said in the last session, we're not there to win points, neither are we. We're here there to listen and love and swap a few things, and especially flush out the Catholics, of course, but we're talking about other people other than Catholics at the moment. So we're there to love people, and I find with Protestants particularly, they've really sort of turned a corner, and I'm saying we've probably turned a corner too, as regards loving one another, and bigotry's dead and buried virtually, and that they can see the need, a great need of us coming together. There's a very good need of all the Christian believers coming together. And they see that, and they will pray with you at the front door and accept what you give them to put on the mantelpiece. And I'm a Catholic. That wouldn't have happened years ago. So that's a great push forward in that regard. The evangelists and that, well, they're a little bit different. They can be a little bit forthright, but we still have had success with them, a bit of dialogue.
Evangelicals. Our fifth category, former Catholics that have left the church. 6, the inactive Catholics. 7, the practising Catholics. Now, these 7 categories will form the basis of our workshops.
I'll tell you a little story about inactive Catholics. We went to visit a house once again. It was one of the last at Kerrang, I think it was, and Our Lady certainly sent us there, but knocked on the door, and a good country woman invited us in without even hardly knowing what we're there for, and she was making cakes and doing a bit of dressmaking at the same time, which women seem to be able to do. And it came out that she said, "Oh, you'll be disappointed. I was a Catholic, but I don't practice, and I only become a Catholic mainly because my husband was a Catholic, and he hasn't practiced for many, many years." And we said, "Oh, and as we're talking away there, my wife was unloading all the goodies and giving the little medals and all the rest of it. And she pulled out something which I wouldn't have done, which she did. It was a scapular, and put it on the table. Well, that was the trump card. The lady looked at the scapular and said, "That's a scapular." I said, "How did you know it's a scapular?" She said, "My husband's worn one all his life." And I said, "Well, that's the reason we're here. Our lady's got us here. Where is he?" She said, "He's dying in hospital." And would he like to receive the sacraments? I think he would. He'd love to, So I'll get Father down there straight away. We got Father down there, and he went back to the sacraments and he died after that. I think he did, didn't he? Where's Maria? Yes. And the lady, I think did she come back? She's come back to the church. So there you are. That's a great story. Yeah.
Now, the initial approach when we knock on a door, you greet the person at the door. You might introduce yourselves and explain that you're visiting on behalf of the parish priest. And everybody varies in their approach to this, so we haven't laid down any imperatives, but they're the basics that you say hello and you go from there. You'll just really be able to sense what you should say next, depending on their reaction when you first say something. If available, offer them a parish information sheet. That can often break the ice a little bit because if it's in a country centre, they'll already know a bit about the parish. They might even know the parish priest. If it's like at Kerrang, for instance, where they really admired the parish priest, even though they were non-Catholic, it helped to give that information sheet. Secondly, you wait for their reaction, which might reveal if they're a non-believer, non-Christian, one of those 7 categories we talked about. Thirdly, at an opportune time, offer them a miraculous medal and leaflet. This is what Our Lady wants us to do. Briefly explain the medal's history and source of grace. Frank Duff wrote that as an absolute principle of your work on a PPC, that you insist upon the miraculous. Fourthly, if possible, obtain the names of Catholics you meet or anyone who would be open to a follow-up visit. So you note that in your notebook or on the sheet you carry around. So the first category, they're not interested. Most people are welcoming or they are open to our visits, but sometimes a person says he's not interested. We might even be hostile. We've had doors slammed in our face, but that's...
I might mention at this stage there's always a lot of disappointments, a lot of people not home. You could go to 8 houses in a row, no one home. And the reason of that, of course, is because of women working these days and not home with the family, unfortunately. So we've got to go through the days. We do make revisits after hours, but it's very unfortunate. But sometimes you get a pleasant surprise. One time, I remember we went to a place and there was a man there and he was looking after 6 of his own little children and little steps of ones, Was not a Catholic and he had 6 children. And we congratulated him so much and saying, "What a great man you are, and your wife's out working." And they were all from the one family, like he had all the children with the one woman. And we came in and we made a fuss of all the children, gave them rosary beads and little medals and the rest of it, and told him what a great man he was. And he was not even a Catholic, but I think he believed in God, yeah.
So it could be any reason that they're not interested. They could be too busy at the time, they're getting the tea on, or they mistake us for Jehovah's Witnesses, or naturally guarded about their privacy. We get occasional, or a lot of houses where it says "do not knock." We still do though, usually. Well, they just could be in a bad mood, so you've got to...
I've got to tell you this story. We went to one up in Kerrang, and there's a certain person here, Maria. Stand up, Maria. She was a great person to have on the PPC because she had been a teacher in the high school and her husband was the principal. And just to show you what good people they must have been and what love they had, everyone we visited knew them and liked her. And therefore we had a foot in the door, and we went to one of her ex-students and he made a fuss of her and everything, and then he said, but don't go any further. He said, they're likely to say anything and it gets worse down here. It was the real dregs of society around there. And as regards the people, they were pretty rough. Anyway, we looked at one another and we said, no, we're going to do it. Well, we went through there, and I tell you what, no matter how rough they were, she was loved and she was able to give them a little bit of help and a little bit of advice, and I tell you what, it was a great exercise to be a part of. Thanks, Maria. Yeah.
And you can always leave the information sheet or some material in the letterbox for not interested people, if you think it's appropriate. The second category, engaging with agnostics. And agnostics are a little different from atheists. Atheists don't believe whatsoever. Agnostics haven't actually made up their mind yet. They don't actually believe in God, but they haven't dismissed him completely.
This is where... Oh, sorry, John.
It's okay.
This is where it does come in to be a good listener and be very reverent with them, be very, on your best behaviour there. And it's just amazing how you can win points with those sort of people. I mean, by meaning, you can get them to understand that your point of view sort of thing. So we aren't forthright, but as Pope John Paul II said, we must be bold. We must be bold.
Well, I often start off with agnostics or even atheists, and you ask them how they explain the beauty of creation, and they'll usually put up some theory, often to do with evolution, and you can always say that nothing comes from nothing. It could have been put into motion by God anyway. The Catholic Church is still open on this question of evolution, in actual fact. So we don't need to be dogmatic about it, just to try to put God behind whatever the process was for life. And there's no record of the beginning of evolution, whether it's true or not, but we do have revelation handed down from the Old Testament through Moses. It was a tradition that Moses wrote Genesis. So there was, and he had personal encounters with God, and other people have, prophets. You could relate that faith and belief in God gives you peace in the present world and sure hope of a future afterlife. And this is where actually atheists do see a difference between believing Christians and themselves, that they see that there's a hope, that we do have a hope. And they may think it's a misguided hope, but some of them envious for that, especially if you can exude a bit of joy.
Yeah.
They probably wish they had that.
Particularly with if there is women home with children and things mightn't be all that good, but they'll go and get the children and you'll hold hands and pray at the door and wish them all the best and hope that they come to know God and give them some little cards and that, and it's a positive, it's a step in the right direction. So it's always a plus. You don't want to walk away from any place thinking it was a negative. I mean, sometimes you might get the short shift, but as long as you're using your good manners, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
And that last point there is what Chris put into practice on a PPC in his very last call. Promise to pray for them, to come to the same faith and belief. And that person that you knocked on the door allowed you to do that.
That's right.
The third category, evangelising non-Christians. So Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus and pagans are some of the people Jesus commanded us to proclaim the gospel to. So we can't just hold it to ourselves, it's got to be spread right around the world. Whilst we must be respectful towards them, we must communicate the truth that Christ is the only way to salvation. He said, I am the way, the truth and the life. Nobody else claimed that. Buddha didn't claim that, or Muhammad, only Jesus. Frank Duff stated that each one must be made aware of Mary, told something about her. And in regard to each of them, she will seek to fulfil her maternal office of giving Christ. The miraculous medal in the hands of non-Christians is the humble instrument of Our Lady's graces to the world.
I remember talking to a big old retired farmers, as families usually are, with great big hands, and he was a good Protestant, and he was disappointed because no one was turning up at his church, and he really could see that we had something together. We had to fight against all that's out there in the world, and obviously it's a lack of God and a lack of people practicing their beliefs. And in the end, after talking to him for a while, I sort of asked him, did he know Father Grace up at Griffiths there? And he said, yes, I do. He said, if they're not turning up down at your place, why don't you go up there? And Father Grace will find you and have a good talk and you know, have a bit of communion with them, you know, and your spirituality will be helped, you know, in that regard. And so he was going to do that. He was going up to Mass the next day, yeah.
Fourth category, engaging with non-Catholics. We're to demonstrate friendly goodwill towards these fellow Christians. Try to establish some common beliefs that they have with Catholic truth. Express your desire for Christian unity that Christ himself prayed for. Just before his crucifixion, that was his long prayer for Christian unity. Unless they're hostile to the Catholic Church, invite them to consider becoming Catholics. There's been cases where people have waited all their lives just for that one invitation. They've often become Catholics and said, well, why didn't someone ask me before? So it's always worth popping the question. If you get the opportunity to explain the doctrine of the Eucharist, refer to John chapter 6 and offer them the leaflet, What Happens at the Mass? A lot of people have never really looked at this, John chapter 6. You've got to encourage them to do it because that's when the first parting of the ways happened, the first split in the church, if you like, as it was then. Some disciples couldn't accept Jesus' teaching on the Eucharist. They said, this is a hard saying, who can accept it? And they walked with him no more. So if you point that particular verse out to them, it's sometimes a shock. They've never really let it sink in, that particular one. They look at diversity. They say it's a wonderful thing to have diversity of religion, but when you see that Jesus was allowing some of his disciples that had followed him all this time to leave him because they wouldn't accept his doctrine on the Eucharist, then it brings them back to the fact that we need unity of belief. Evangelising former Catholics. Respectfully inquire the reason they left the church. Now, actually, I've myself on PPCs discovered Catholics who originally said, no, I'm not Catholic. And then you say, oh, you wouldn't have happened to go to a Catholic school, would you? Because you just detect a little bit of hesitancy with them. And they often say, oh, yeah, I went to a Catholic school, but, you know, now I don't go anymore. But you've established that they were Catholics once. And then if you ask them, well, what was your experience at school? Did you enjoy it? Most of them will say, yes, I got a good education. I enjoyed going along to school. And it starts to bring back memories. They start to maybe think how much the church has given them, really. And it's a way of trying to attract them back. Were you going to say something there, Chris?
He was, but I've forgotten.
Oh, okay. Point out the Christ.
Yes, I think the talking to non-Catholics is probably very difficult. You've got to be careful what you say and be very gentle with them and suggest a few things and Of course, it depends on the person. Some of them are just lazy and they need a bit of, a little bit more than that. But, just play it carefully. But I think everyone's got the ability to do that, to talk to them and love them and invite them back to it and realise what they're missing, and perhaps mention the fact that the Eucharist wells up to eternal life, and if you're not receiving it, just remind them of that fact and those sort of things.
So a lot of these former Catholics that joined Protestant faiths were never really catechised properly, and that's why they left in the first place, and then they all of a sudden discover the Bible, and not that they then have the correct interpretation of the Bible, but it's still common ground that you can still talk to them on an even footing. And then be ready to answer any objection they might raise. They might bring up all sorts of things where the Catholic Church is wrong. This is where, as we said earlier, be prepared for an answer. Or if not, say that you can find out the answer from your parish priest and come back.
That's where you need Alison. That's where you need Alison with you. She's got all the answers. She's been there and done that. Is that right, Alison?
Now, the whole theme of this conference is faith in action. And unfortunately, we've got a lot of inactive Catholics. Some may call them lapsed Catholics, but it's probably a softer term to call them inactive.
Some of them don't realise that you can't be unbaptised.
Good point.
But they're children. There's a lot in the children, there's a lot of people that the children can get them back. If you can get them to be involved with the sacraments and a visit from the priest, and then you're heading in the right direction.
Now, they may raise an objection, and, the current problem which makes our evangelisation efforts a little bit difficult is the scandal of child abuse. Clergy child abuse in particular, and all you have to do is point out to them that it's not the church's fault, it's just that some members of the church have been unfaithful. Because the church is spotless, but it's made up of less than perfect people. And inform them that they can find healing and be reconciled with the church. If there was some hurt that they're harbouring when they're in the church, then they can always get healing and reconciliation. Invite them to meet the parish priest or to start attending Mass again. It's really important to get them to go back to Mass. And encourage practising Catholics. This is the last category. Urge them to increase their spirituality through more frequency of the sacraments, daily rosary or other forms of prayer.
Remind them that we're here to know, love and serve God, which we learned in our penny catechism, and that if they're not doing that, well, they're not really achieving what they were put on the earth for, to know, to love and to serve our God. If they're practising Catholics, they would know that, and that they've got to get closer.
So anyway, suggest they get involved in the parish. They don't have to be Legionaries of Mary, though it'd be good if they could be, but they can join any other association, choir or whatever. St Vincent de Paul is an attraction to a lot of people. We've got to move fairly quickly now if we want to have any time for the workshop. I just want to show the distinction between evangelising or proselytising. In Evangelii Gaudium, the recent encyclical of Pope Francis, he mentions proselytising, and Catholics don't do that. We try to evangelise just as we were told to do, go out and preach the gospel. But proselytising has a similar meaning to evangelising, but in modern times it's got a negative connotation. Forced conversions to Islam or coercion by Protestant sects in providing food only to those who convert to their faith are examples of proselytising. So don't be frightened to go out there and talk about your love of God and your love of Christ. That's not proselytising. And the Legion of Mary actively seeks conversions to the church, with the exception of our Orthodox brethren, with whom we should be working for unity. And our handbook states that.
I'll just finish with a funny one. Quite often you'll get, or not quite often, but occasionally perhaps, you get chased away, and then the people realise that you're Catholics. At first they think you're hot gospelers, you know, from the other religions, and then they're Catholics and they realise.
Okay, just a little logistic here, keeping count. Chris actually touched on it earlier. You have to take a sheet around, it's ruled columns and all that, and you record all the, virtually the whole visit. You know, what faith they are, obviously the street name and the house number, and whether they need a follow-up visit, if they've got any needs from the parish, and even if they've accepted rosary beads, miraculous medals, you can take a note of that. And then those notes are transferred to the PPC coordinator's master sheets at the end of the day.
Even though one takes one job and one takes the other mostly, and you can swap over, but it is a good idea to have a bit of cross-reference, because it's amazing how you can forget. If you've got a couple of statistics, it's good.
And after 2 weeks of heavy work, you do need to wind down and have a debriefing. So if you promised anybody that you'd find particular answers to the faith, or you might have promised to send them some information, do it as soon as you can, while it's fresh in your mind. Keep up the prayers for all your contacts in the PPC and for the parish you work in.
And as far as that debriefing is concerned, the actual fellowship that you build up on a PPC is just magnificent, isn't it?
Yeah,
and there's a great lot of good times we have.
It's like being in a footy team.
That's right.
And report back to your PPC, to your Presidium about the PPC, because you needed your PPC president to sign you off to allow you to go on that PPC. So it is Presidium work, actually. It's not Senatus work, it's Presidium work. And there may be a debriefing meeting involving the PPC coordinator and the president of the council, like the Curia or the Senatus that arranged it. And you should then, just as Chris is doing right now, share your positive experiences with fellow legionaries and encourage their participation in future PPCs. Now, thanks for your attention. They are the 7 topics. We'll leave them up on the screen.